Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the A to Z of AI. We are really excited to welcome Nihal Shah, CFO of Headspace, here today. Nihal, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Nihal, you and I first met a few years back at one of the F-Suite events we were hosting in the Bay Area. At the time, you were a CFO of another company, and as of June 2025, you joined Headspace. But before we dive into the episode today, it would be great if you could introduce yourself, tell the audience a bit more about what you do, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, both Anthony and Zach, thanks for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. Really admire everything you guys do in the F Suite, and really love the content that you guys are putting out there. As you said, I joined Headspace in June, so I'm here as CFO of the company. I have all your traditional areas like finance and accounting, but the area that I spend a lot of time on, and that might be a little bit unique to my background, is that I also have corporate strategy that comes under me, and so I handle the whole company's corporate strategy, and that for me, it's a lot of what I do in my traditional CFO role, as well as a little bit more than a regular CFO.
Awesome. Neil, I want to ask you to think back to November 2022. And, very special date as it relates to our podcast, because that's when we all experienced ChatGPT for the first time. So think back to that period and earlier and think to now. How has your role as CFO in the finance function changed over the past few years?
Yeah. So it's really hard to even imagine what it was before and after. And that's because I think AI has just become so integrated into our lives now in such a short amount of time. And I'm not even just talking on a professional basis. I'm even talking about just regular life. I use AI for everything from fixing a sink to handling complex strategic problems at work. And so it's permeated, just day to day life in a way that I've not seen any other technology. And unfortunately, for those of you who are watching, I'm old enough to remember some of the stuff of when the internet came out. Like I remember when I got my first 28.8 modem and what the internet was. This is just like a different level of just getting into every aspect of life. And I think the key areas that I think are changing is just the speed at which things can get done is just at a different velocity with this type of technology. That's kind of the first key thing. The second is the ability to actually have real cognitive power that's at your fingertips. And, if you think about that, you always had your own cognition, which obviously is something you've always had, but the ability to use AI as a force multiplier to your thinking and just the amount that you can kind of do with that. In my mind, it is an ability to really take what's really good and working in your head and put it out on a workspace, which is the AI, and just really beat it up and get to new levels of cognition. And so those have been the two things for me, is just the speed and the depth that you can go to analysis on things.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I want to drill down on that a little bit with you because, we've already on this podcast seen a whole range of really impressive use cases. Some of them are in sort of the strategic space. Some of them are tactical. Oftentimes it's automation. But what you're describing really is something different, right? In my academic work, really my main use for this technology is kind of as a thought partner. And I'm hearing you describe something similar. So I just love to hear you say more about that.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Zach. I think the use case that I've seen the most value from AI is this thought partner. Because if you think about it, you don't have the ability to constantly get feedback on something. Any human being, you've got a short amount of time. There's communication gaps. There's speed. This thing is constantly there, right? And you can constantly keep putting information into it. We can give it more context. You can give it more data, and it's moving at a speed that's pretty much almost close to like how fast things are processing in your head. And so I think that's the really key piece of this technology for me, is that it's a real, for the first time, sounding board for what's going on in your head. And I've never seen another technology that's allowed you to do something like that.
Walk us through today, a day in the life of Nihal. And I know you said you're using it across multiple areas, both personally and professionally. And I know we can all relate to that. But give us some more insight into how you're leveraging AI, and I want to get a little bit more specific, right? Like, are you using GPT, Gemini, Claude, all three, right? Like, give us some more details around that.
Yeah. So I'll start with the tools. The three tools that I use are ChatGPT, Gemini, and NotebookLM. I use basically ChatGPT and Gemini as basically things to keep each other honest because every model has its own kind of biases and pros and cons, and so I kind of try to keep both running simultaneously because sometimes I'll get insight from one that I'm not getting from the other, and so there's a benefit in that. I don't go too crazy by doing too many tools because my one big belief is that you got to master the tool you have before you try to get like the newest hottest thing. Like just jumping around and having the surface level understanding of each tool is less good than really going deep and understanding the tool you have. So those are the two kind of main you LLMs that I use. And then I also love NotebookLM because it allows me to kind of have a little bit more of a, especially in terms of the analytical work. Like when I really need to go very very deep on a subject, I don't want a bunch of like random information that I don't know is going into the output in the analysis. I find Notebook LM is really good because you can kind of give it a very clear sense of like, here's the files I want you to look at. Here's the like limitations on what I want you to make the decision on. And then the beauty, I think, of Notebook LM is that podcast piece, which for me, especially as somebody who absorbs information in an auditory fashion really well, I have just upped the amount of information that I can absorb. Like, so for example, you know, there's so many things that like your product team will come to you with like all these new updates and really cool stuff they're doing on the technology side. The go to market side will come to you with all this information. The biggest limitation is your time. And so the ability to take that information and then make a podcast out of it and then listen to it on my way to, on the way to work while I'm driving, stuff like that. That's just allowed me to take such a vast amount of information, synthesize it and make it into a form that I can kind of digest it very quickly throughout the day.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm the same as you. Uh, One of the most powerful use cases for me has been really exceptional text to speech that can actually extract great stuff from otherwise really complex documents that have lots of footnotes and stuff that you don't want it to read, et cetera. Unbelievably powerful use case for we auditory learners, for sure. No, in terms of measuring success, when you see your teams use these tools, when you're using these tools, what are the indications that you're getting that hey, it's not just the way that I work that's different, but my capacity is improved, or my output is better. What are you looking to? What have you noticed this past few years that tells you this is really worth your and your team's time?
Yeah, it's a great question, Zach. And I actually think part of the question is when not to use AI
Yeah.
too, because I think that just forcing AI, it's a tool, and it's not to be used all the time for every single thing. And so I always keep my team based on outcomes. I don't think I don't say, hey, you have to use AI and show me every AI use case for every little thing. My view is, look, I'm looking for the best outcome, and I think AI is going to help you in a lot of cases to get to the best outcome, but I don't want to force it. I think what's really helped AI in terms of the outcomes that I'm getting is one, the speed. I think people have been able to synthesize a lot of the speed that you can kind of get from AI. I think the other is the structured thinking. And this is back to kind of what we were saying with what we were talking about, Anthony, is that the structure of your answer is so very important because it allows the people to follow and connect with the logic and then build on it. And that's the real key thing in a company is it's not just about outputting data. It's really being able to kind of transfer that logical framework into other areas. So for example, I always view finance not as something that works in isolation, but like I tell all my guys, you're an expert in finance, but you need to come to the table with another skill. So my go-to-market guys, they are finance guys, but they need to understand the products. They need to understand our end market. They need to be able to speak the language of the GTM people. And so when you come with that framework, you're able to then take that framework and move it into that language of GTM, make those connections. That's where the magic happens, I think, between finance and other areas is when you're really connecting and not acting in isolation.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. I'm curious, so much of what we're seeing right now, And, I'll just take the sample size of the past 2 weeks as it relates to AI. There's a significant amount of things going on. Uh, and there is this continued pressure that I think everybody's feeling at companies around, I've got to find ways to incorporate this in my job. And it needs to then X improve my output and what I am doing. And so I want to just dig in a little bit deeper, maybe on two levels as you think about your team. And then as you think about this as it relates to an executive in the company, how are you encouraging, motivating, leading, structuring usage of AI in such that it's driving productive business outcomes? You just talked about finance and GTM and the intersection of all of that. But yeah, just tell us a little bit more around how are you approaching all of this in such a way that everyone can rise to the occasion around the moment we find ourselves in.
Yeah. Well, one, thank you for identifying what I think is a little bit of a problem of our time, Anthony, which is the pressure to use AI, right? And I think a lot of that is, if I had to just guess, it's like, look at what's happening to, SaaS stocks in the public market. If you're not AI, you're not anything. And this is my kind of through line on everything. I'm saying your AI is a tool, but it's not the destination, right? And so I kind of want to first take that pressure off my team that, like, and this is linked to the previous answer I gave. I'm about the outcome. If AI doesn't help you get to the outcome faster, then don't use it. It's a tool. Yeah, right. And if it does, then, obviously let's use it. And so to the question of, how do I get more usage? How do I get best practices? One, we made sure that everybody had this is obviously the first thing, is having an enterprise level version of the an AI tool is just very different than something that's going to cut you off. So we started there with just the enablement of everybody having it. Two, a lot of times you don't even know the best way to use it because you didn't think of it, right? And so every kind of all hands that we have one every month. We have a person come to the table with a unique and novel use case, and then we incentivize it. We give like a nominal gift certificate, but it's so people submit these things. And so every time somebody's coming with a new novel use case and you're hearing it and people are surrounded by it. And so as you kind of just hear it, you get more acceptance. There's people who are on different ends of the spectrum, right? Some of the younger people are adopting AI and using it nonstop. And then, I have older people on my team, very experienced, that, are a little bit scared of what it does and trusting it and stuff like that. And that's a very valid thing too, because it's not right a lot of times too. And so just A, making it accessible, B, incentivizing its use by giving kind of a place where you can kind of just really just see a lot of really interesting use cases and learning from each other. That's kind of how we've gotten a lot of usage, is that somebody else has used it in accounting in one way, and then the FP&A guys suddenly are, oh, I didn't even know you could do something like that with NotebookLM. So for example, like, very much the podcast thing. A lot of people didn't even know you can make a podcast out of Notebook LM notes. And so that's that cross pollination where we all help each other grow.
So, thinking about your team and this fantastic answer, uh, certainly as a lawyer who's getting kind of middle career, I'm thinking a lot about folks entering this profession. I imagine you think too about folks coming into finance now. What, if anything, what do you worry they might not develop that they ought to, or might lose by, say, over relying on these tools, relying on them in a way that might be momentarily helpful, but career longitudinally harmful? What advice might you give to those younger folks?
That's a phenomenal question, Zach. And it all comes down to, like, if you just outsource your thinking and you just outsource all your ability to do stuff, you're not actually running the math in your head. And I'll give you a perfect example. I was, I'm looking to buy a house. A house, just like simple thing, putting it into ChatGPT. Hey, like, run this mortgage, and it came back with the wrong answer. Now, I have a finance degree, and I know that the mortgage doesn't work that way. But it's because I've done the calculation by hand, right? And so I know with a calculator how to do this. And so this is the thing, to your point, Zach, that's being lost is that, remember, like back to what we've always started with, ChatGPT is a tool, but it's not something you trust without verification. And so the minute I saw that, I was like, that's wrong. I prompted as, oh yeah, my bad. That's not how you do a mortgage calculation. And so, that's the thing that I always tell people is that anything that this thing is doing, you should be able to do with a pen and paper and a calculator or an Excel sheet. Because if you lose that ability, then you are forever dependent on something, and that's just going to make you a lot weaker. Because you one, you're not gonna catch the mistake. That's the first problem. Two, when somebody asks you to make a change, you're not going to be able to make that change without running to ChatGPT. And in most cases, you're not kind of having ChatGPT whispering in your ear as you're having a conversation. You need to be able to make those changes on the fly as you're talking to somebody. And so I always tell people it's good to use it as like a check. Like I'm totally fine with you doing your work and then you checking it. I in fact encourage that because then I'm going to get the right answer more often. And everybody makes mistakes, but I never am like, hey, just go give me a ChatGPT answer. I mean, that in one way, Zach, the people who do that are obviating themselves. And so that's the one thing you want in this world where AI is taking a lot of people's jobs is you need to make sure that you're stronger because otherwise, if you can just send it straight to GPT, then you're going to become redundant.
Oh man, yeah. Well said. No notes on that, my friend.
Nihal, we like to close this out with a few rapid fire questions. We call this the A to Z moment. And I want to actually start off with a bit of a different question here than normal, right? But just building off what you just shared, what do you find yourself spending more time on now, given how you're using AI?
Yeah. I'll answer that in two different ways. One, I'll start with I am going much deeper on myself with AI because it's allowed me to be critical and developmental on myself. And by that, I mean, for example, even just things like communication polish, right? I've had it go through my board decks and I've got it, gone through my emails and it's come back to me and said, hey, sometimes you are too definitive in your statements. You should leave a little bit of room for wiggle, right? Super, super important for a CFO, especially in a situation where you may be in the public market setting. You need to be able to kind of move away from a statement at times because hey, we're in the business of predicting the future, and that's really hard to do, and things aren't so certain. And so there was these little polishing things that just are making me a better executive is kind of one piece of it. Another piece of it is that it's also really helped me realize like how to be a more in-depth thinker. And I've even had it say, hey, listen, like go through all of the ways that I've attacked the problems that I've presented you and tell me, is there any philosophy? Is there any self-help book? Is there anything that I should be doing to make myself better? And it actually came back and was like, hey, and in my case, it was like, think about stoicism because it was like you spend a lot of time worrying about the outcomes when they're out of your control. And so it really like just and I know it's a little philosophical, but I always feel again that it's about developing you. AI is about developing you. It's not just about like, replacing workflows. But I kind of learned that it just helped me think about things. And so it actually in many ways de-stressed a lot of like really tough, complex situations for me because it was for me now more about like, hey, am I just doing the best job possible to make the best decision with the information I have? And, that is the goal versus, look, like when Archer pulls the arrow back and shoots, there's, 100 things that happen to that arrow as it's flying through the air and, the wind changes this, that. That's not the point. Did you do everything correct to shoot that arrow? I did. Then you should feel really good about yourself. So, for me, it's really been about thinking and developing myself more than anything else.
Man, that's fantastic. And I have to say, I mean, I absolutely love the idea of one of these LLMs pointing you or any of us towards something as useful as stoicism. I think maybe OpenAI and Anthropic ought to sneak that into the code and make that a recommendation for all of us. That's good wisdom. One final question. So if someone listening to this podcast were to try just one of the many things that you've mentioned today, what's that one thing that in your view they should try?
Yeah. I think the one thing is just this use it to think through really. I think that this is the thing where this thing is the true thought partner. I'm going to kind of go back to where we started this conversation. It moves at the speed you do. It moves with a lot of information. It can supplement you. It can develop you. But with that comes the very strong warning: it should not replace you. And so you need to really figure out, how do you actually become 1 + 1 is 3, rather than this just obviating your thinking. And so, right back to where we started the whole kind of podcast, I would think really, really hard about how you actually structure your own results. How do you use it to expand and amplify what you're doing? And then close that loop and say, hey, next time when I need to think about a problem better, what are the key things that I should do to improve myself? And so then I'm part of that continuous improvement loop with the AI, not without me in the loop.
That's awesome, Nihal. I'm just feeling refreshed and encouraged by this conversation because of how you've challenged all of us, including me, to be thinking about how can we use AI as an effective tool. And what's really resonating with me is how you're thinking about using it in ways to make us all better without losing the very thing that makes us really valuable in the workplace and in all relationships, right? The gifts we all bring to the table, the way we analyze, the way we think, and as a full loop of getting that feedback. To just add to what you said earlier, right? Like recently, I did this, and I encouraged our team to do this. Is, hey, take some of the recordings from sales conversations we have, and genuinely get both positive and areas of improvement. And in reading through some of that, even for myself, it was like looking in a mirror. Like, oh my goodness. Like, yes, I noticed I do that. And wow, I've got to really hone in and focus on those areas, right? So anyway, I just want to say thank you because I love the vulnerability you've brought to this conversation. So much of this conversation I've just related to as like, yes, I want to do this better, and I want to become a better professional, a better human in all the ways I'm using this, and remembering that it's a tool.
I love what you said, Anthony. And that's like a really strong message that I think is getting lost in this, is that
Yeah.
with all of this AI, it's about doing your job better, accomplishing your mission in whatever company you have. But it's also about becoming more efficient and actually giving you the time to be more human, right? I've found that I get my work done faster. I spend more time with my kids, more time with my wife, more time with my friends. And at the end of the day, if AI isn't helping us with those things, then what's the point?
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you. What an amazing way to end. Really, really appreciate you sharing your insights. Really appreciate you taking the time. Always a pleasure to spend time together. Hopefully, we can see each other in person the next time I'm out in the Bay Area. But until then, thank you so much for today.
Thanks, Anthony. Thanks, Zach. It's been a pleasure.
Our pleasure.